This week, a single Supreme Court ruling just sent a $175 billion shockwave ripping through the global economy. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what this means for you and your business.
Just think about that number for a second. Up to $175 billion. That's the scale of the economic shift we're talking about. And it was all set in motion by one court decision. It's already sending tremors through markets and corporate boardrooms everywhere.
And this, right here, is the central question everyone's asking. It's a massive windfall, but who actually gets it? The answer is, well, it's not simple at all. It pulls back the curtain on a really complex story about power, policy, and who ultimately ends up paying the price. Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to walk through the court's shock ruling, then the constitutional power struggle that caused it. After that, we'll get to the truth about those billions in refunds, why the trade war is definitely not over, and finally, how the rest of the world is reacting to all this chaos.
So it all kicked off on February 20th, 2026. What seemed like just another day ended with a bombshell decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, one that literally redrew the map for global trade overnight.
In a pretty decisive 6-3 vote, the court said that the president's use of emergency powers to just slap these sweeping tariffs on everybody was unconstitutional. Just like that, years of tariffs on major trading partners, we're talking China, the EU, Mexico, Canada, were invalidated. It was a huge judicial smackdown of a central piece of the administration's economic strategy.
So you've got to be asking, what was the legal argument for such a dramatic move? Well, it really boils down to a classic American power struggle. Who actually has the right to tax and control trade? The president or Congress?
You see, for years, the administration had been leaning on this one law from 1977, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. They argued that things like trade deficits or fentanyl smuggling were national emergencies, which gave them the power to regulate importation. But, when the Supreme Court actually put it under a microscope, they found that legal ground was pretty darn shaky.
And this is where the legal logic gets really fascinating. Chief Justice Roberts brought out something called the Major Questions Doctrine. He basically argued that an issue this massive, giving the president the power to set taxes on this scale, was a transformative expansion of power. And for something that big, you need crystal clear permission from Congress. That little phrase, regulate importation, the court decided that just didn't cut it. Not even close.
So boom, the tariffs are illegal. That immediately created a monumental $175 billion question. What happens to all that money that was collected? Let's unpack what this really means.
This is the question I've heard from everyone. It seems totally logical, right? If businesses get this huge refund check, we should finally see some relief at the cash register. But the economic reality, well, it's turning out to be surprisingly different. And honestly, pretty disappointing for a lot of people.
Yeah, take a look at the data. All the research shows that it was American consumers, not foreign companies, who ended up carrying most of the cost. About 90% of these tariffs were passed straight on to us through higher prices on, well, everything, from your phone to your furniture. Basically, we've been footing the bill this whole time. So let's make this crystal clear. The refund isn't going back to consumers, not a dime. Instead, what we're looking at is a massive wealth transfer from taxpayers to the corporations that originally paid the tariffs. Retail prices aren't expected to fall at all, which means the people who paid more get nothing back, and all this could end up blowing a huge hole in the federal deficit.
Now, if you're thinking this court ruling means the trade war is finally over, think again. The administration's response was incredibly fast and powerful. The policy whiplash was immediate.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you how incredibly agile they were. Within just a few hours of the Supreme Court's ruling, they pivoted to a totally different law, this one from 1974, and slapped on a new global tariff. By the very next day, they'd already cranked it up to the legal max of 15%. The message couldn't be clearer. The policy isn't going anywhere, even if the legal paperwork has to change.
But this new tariff isn't a permanent solution. That 1974 law has a strict 150-day time limit, so you should think of this as a transitional bridge. It buys the administration 5 months to cook up a new, more permanent tariff plan. The tariff money will keep flowing, and the trade war, well, it's set to continue.
So as you can imagine, the rest of the world was watching this dizzying chain of events with a mix of, let's call it whiplash. The rules of global trade were completely rewritten, and then rewritten again, all in less than 48 hours.
And you can see a really clear strategic split here. The EU was furious, calling it pure tariff chaos, as a massive €1.7 trillion trade deal now hangs by a thread. China, on the other hand, is being called an accidental winner, playing it cool and gaining a ton of leverage. And our North American partners, Mexico and Canada, they're temporarily exempt, but they're scrambling for answers in a state of complete uncertainty.
So what's the big takeaway for global business? It's this. The legal justification for the trade war just got a facelift, but the war itself is still very much on. In fact, it's just entered a new and maybe even more volatile chapter. The uncertainty is not over, it's just evolved. And all of this leaves us with the one critical, strategic question that every single business leader has to answer now. In a world where tariff barriers are just the new normal, what's your strategy? How do you build a resilient supply chain and at the same time find a way to grow? That is the challenge and maybe the opportunity that lies ahead.